Welcome back to the Hebrew Point of View and to our discussion on the letter that Paul wrote to the Ephesians. And our text is Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 12. Just read the text again for us quickly, and that'll just bring us all back onto the same page. And we are discussing just the introduction so far.
All right, so chapter 6 verse 12, for we are not wrestling with flesh and blood, contending only with physical opponents, but against the despotisms, against the powers, against the master spirits who are the world rulers of this present darkness, against the spirit forces of wickedness in the heavenly sphere.
Okay, and that's out the Amplified Bible, which kind of assumes a meaning for the word that we discussed in our last discussion. And that is epuranios, the Greek word for heavenlies. We said that it says in our English translation heavenly places, but the word places has been added. It's not there in the Greek. It's not in the Greek text. Because they are trying to describe something that has been written in Hebrew. And it's a Hebrew understanding, it's a Hebrew word, a Hebrew concept for which there is no Greek word. And so we have this very clumsy word, epuranios, and we've got to figure out what that means, and we'll come to that. Before we do that, I'm going to just tell you what the Greek words are for principality, power, might, and dominion, just so we are aware of what Paul is talking about here. And this is what the Greek translator has tried to express to us. So, a principality, the word for principality in Greek is arche, A-R-C-H-E. And it means a ruler or a chief or a magistrate or a principal or someone in power. It is a reference to somebody in charge or who rules a principality. So the rule of a principality would be the chief or a ruler or a magistrate or whatever his name is. That's arche. Power, above every power.
So is that one that you just mentioned now?
Arche.
Despotisms.
I'm not sure what
that interpretation is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Power, exousia, is a privilege. In other words, someone in a privileged position, in a position of privilege, of power. Someone who has force or who has capacity, competency, and then again magistrate. Potentate, again, is another very highfalutin word for someone in power. Someone who is delegated influence.
Okay, it's interesting.
Okay, so these are the people that Paul is saying, our God is greater than these guys. These were all the people that were ruling these citizens of Ephesus and Philippi and Colossus. And
which we can relate to, because we've got the same type of people ruling in our cities and our whatever.
Yes. Might, which is the Greek word is dunamis, that is force. That is power. That's
might and power, yes.
Moving force. In other words, the force that it takes to move this table, if I had to push it, I would not be using exousia, I would be using dunamis. Yeah. If I used exousia, I would say to you, move this table, and you would have to obey.
So
that's exousia.
That's the authority you have to tell me to do that.
But dunamis is the actual power that moves it.
Okay.
So there was and we don't really understand this. I guess if you lived in a despotism somewhere, or if you lived in an African state somewhere where somebody had absolute power, you would understand this as being power to move you. I have the power to move you. I have the power to kill you. I have the power to imprison you. Okay? And then dominion, it's the Greek word kuriotes, which means basically governments collectively or rulers collectively. In other words, all of the rulers put together, all of the emperor and all of his potentates, all of his magistrates, all of his people who's got under his rule and in his hand, in his quiver, as it were. These are the people that have the dominion. So places were referred to as dominions. The dominion of Babylon, or the dominion of Nineveh, or whatever. These were
counties, maybe.
Collectively, all the rulers together.
Okay.
And that's what the Greek word kuriotes means.
Yeah.
So now, remember we said this is an epistle, so we have to look at the beginning, we have to read what the body is, and then we have to go to the end and see what his message is, how he sums it up. You have to read an epistle in its entirety.
Which is a letter.
We don't have the time to deal with every chapter. We'd be here for the rest of the year. So let's jump now to Ephesians chapter 4.
Okay.
And let's read verse 14 through 24. It's quite a long section, but it's necessary for us to read this.
14 to 24.
Yeah. So we're in the body of Paul's message to the Ephesians, or to the churches.
So then we may no longer be children, tossed like ships to and fro between chance gusts of teaching, and wavering with every changing wind of doctrine, the cunning and cleverness of unscrupulous men, gamblers engaged in every shifting form of trickery in inventing errors to mislead. Rather, let our lives lovingly express truth in all things, speaking truly, dealing truly, living truly. Enfolded in love, let us grow up in every way and in all things into Him, who is the head, Christ the Messiah, the Anointed One. For because of Him, the whole body, the church in all its various parts, closely joined and firmly knit together by the joints and ligaments with which it is supplied, when each part with power adapted to its need is working properly, grows to full maturity, building itself up in love. So this I say and solemnly testify in the name of the Lord, as in His presence, that you must no longer live as the heathen, the Gentiles, do in their perverseness, in the folly, vanity, and emptiness of their souls, and the futility of their minds.
Stop it. Read that again. Just remember what we've been saying.
Right, where they're coming from.
This is his message. And what is he talking? He's talking to these Gentiles. And listen to what he's saying to them. Just read that verse again. That verse kind of sums everything up.
Right. So this I say and solemnly testify in the name of the Lord, as in His presence, that you must no longer live as the heathen, the Gentiles, do in their perverseness, in the folly, vanity, and emptiness of their souls, and the fertility of their minds. Their moral understanding is darkened, and their reasoning is beclouded. They are alienated, estranged, self-banished from the life of God, with no share in it. This is because of the ignorance, the want of knowledge and perception, the willful blindness that is deep-seated in them, due to their hardness of heart, to the insensitiveness of their moral nature. It's a lot he's saying here.
Yeah. But he's basically summing up the life of the pagans.
Yes.
Because immorality was central to pagan worship.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. In their spiritual, verse 19, in their spiritual apathy, they have become callous and past feeling and reckless, and have abandoned themselves to prey, to unbridled sensuality, eager and greedy to indulge in every form of impurity. But you did not so learn Christ, assuming that you have really heard Him and been taught by Him, as all truth is in Jesus, embodied and personified in Him. Strip yourselves of your former nature, put off and discard your old unrenewed self, which characterized your previous manner of life and becomes corrupt through lusts and desires that spring forth from delusion. And be constantly renewed in the spirit of your mind, having a fresh mental and spiritual attitude, and put on the new nature, the regenerated self created in God's image in true righteousness and holiness.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
if
I get
you've
it now.
been
I see
listening to me,
Yep.
we have the introduction, and if we took that word heavenlies and we ran with it, we would miss this. The message here is a message to these Gentiles that they are different. They're not like they used to be.
Well, they shouldn't be like they used to be.
Well, yeah, but he's saying if you really have been dedicated yourself to Christ the way I've heard that you have, he said, I've heard of your faithfulness and your love to all the saints. Remember that, how he started off?
Yeah, yeah.
If this is you, then I want you to know that you're different. And you're not subject to all of these things. And I use the word things, but I can also use influences. I can also use rulers. I can use powers and dominions that forced you, that ruled you. Your misguided beliefs in gods that you thought had all of this power and influence, but have nothing.
Right.
They are nothing.
Yeah.
God is the only God. So he's talking to them and he's saying, I want you to understand here. You were taught with regard to your former life, with regard to all these things, to put off that old self. Remember, I read from Kenneth first, he said, take you out of the first Adam into the last Adam. The first Adam there, he's talking about his sinful nature.
Yeah.
That tendency to go after anything and everything just after our sinful nature, the lusts of the flesh.
Gratification.
Yeah. He's saying you've come out of it, you've put that off. And that part of you that was corrupted, and you've been made new in the attitude of your mind. And you've put on the new self. And you've been recreated to be like God in righteousness and holiness.
Therefore, you should change the way you think.
Right.
And the way you act.
So what is he saying in this letter? He's saying, I want you Gentiles who are coming into the church, who have become believers, who have put on Christ, who have believed in Yeshua, who believe in Jehovah because of Yeshua. I want you to know that all of the old influences and all of the old powers that you thought you were subject to no longer mean a thing. For God is much greater.
He takes the place of that.
He's much higher than every name that can be named, every power, every authority, all of these dominions, all of these rulers collectively put together. Any ruler that rules you today and any ruler that will rule you tomorrow, I want you to know
God is greater. However, you shouldn't be under any other rulers.
But remember where they're coming from.
I know, but how did
their whole lives have been...
Did they reject that? Did they reject their past and the way that they were living?
No,
I guess we don't know that.
It's just through ignorance. These are new believers who know nothing about Judaism, who know everything about paganism.
Yeah, sure.
So get this we have to get this in our understanding who's writing to.
It makes so much sense.
We cannot approach this as people who have grown up in the church, grown up as never doubting God, always being influenced by God. This is not who Paul is writing to. Paul is writing to people who have never known God, know nothing about Judaism, have come into this church, and these believers all consider themselves to be Jews. And they hear, and all they have when they relate to gods and being saints or devoted to gods are the things that they can remember from their past. And so
are they trying to bring that into their new belief system?
They just trying to worship God, but they're worshiping God with the tools that they have, the things that they know. And Paul is saying, I want to re-educate you.
Yeah.
Okay, I want you to understand that you've put off the old self. Okay, now you've got to put on the new self. This new understanding.
Regenerated.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Who God has created you to be.
Yeah.
And understand the power that God has.
But isn't that salvation though? Isn't that salvation, to take off the old and put on the new?
It is, yes.
I mean, you have
It's
to
passing
go
from one state of being into another state of being.
you have to
from
put away
one
what you
set
learned.
of beliefs into another set of beliefs. And that's the whole purpose of baptism,
Right.
is putting off the old
The
stuff
old and putting
on
to
the
the
new.
new,
Yeah.
which they very well knew, the Jews anyway.
But the point that I really want to stress and over again is that Paul is writing this letter with a specific purpose. He is addressing
Yes.
people who
Yeah.
are pagan in
Yeah.
thought and in
Practice.
word
Yep.
and in history and in understanding. And he's saying, listen guys,
You're going to have to
this
change.
is new, this is different. Put off those old things. I want you to know God is above
He's greater.
all of these things. Don't worry about the influence of the government,
Sure.
of the emperor, of
That
the
is
emperor's
so,
envoys that
that
are trying
is
to
so
force
powerful
you to worship
though.
him. Yeah.
That is so powerful what Paul is saying to them.
Yeah.
Because they, I mean, just looking at some of the gods that people believe in, they really believe in those gods.
Of course they do.
I mean, they worship them. They really believe in them. Now they've got to take something into a God that they haven't even seen. So this is a big shift for them.
Right. So now let's go to Ephesians chapter 6,
Now we get back to the same one.
verse 12. Yeah. So this is the last chapter in the epistle. So Paul introduces it. He said, I want you to know that God is greater than all of these powers and dominions and that all the things that you're facing now. And then he goes back and says, I want you to know that this, you have to change. Read this letter to the Ephesians and you'll see Paul is re-educating these Gentiles who have come from a pagan background. So now he's summing it up. This is the end of his letter.
So
12.
are we reading
Verse 12 to 19.
I'd like to read from 10.
Okay?
In conclusion, be strong in the Lord. Be empowered through your union with Him. Draw your strength from Him, that strength which His boundless might provides.
So the very first words of verse 10 are in conclusion.
That's right.
In
So-
conclusion, he's saying, okay, I've given you the message, now let's sum it up.
Yep,
Okay?
that's right.
You have to understand how these things work. This is
Yeah.
a letter. So, in conclusion,
Yep.
okay,
And put on God's whole armor, the armor of a heavy armed soldier, which God supplies, that you may be able successfully to stand up against all the strategies and deceits that you've come from. Right?
and that are set against you right
Yeah.
now.
Right.
Yeah.
For we are not wrestling with flesh and blood, contending only with physical opponents, but against the despotisms, against the powers, against the master spirits who are the world rulers of this present darkness, against the spirit forces of wickedness in the heavenly sphere. Therefore put on God's complete armor. He says it again. This is the second time he's saying it, that you may be able to resist and stand your ground on the day of danger, and having done all the crisis demands, to stand firmly in your place. Stand therefore, hold your ground, having tightened the belt of truth around your loins, and having put on the breastplate of integrity and of moral rectitude and right standing with God, and having shod your feet in preparation to face your own enemy, or whatever you're dealing with, I guess. And the readiness produced by the good news of the gospel of peace. Lift up over all the shield of saving faith, upon which you can quench all the flaming missiles, and take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, wields, which is the word of God. Pray at all times, on every occasion, in every season, in the Spirit, with all prayers and entreaties. So to that end, alert and watch with strong purpose and perseverance, interceding in behalf of the saints, and also for me, that freedom of utterance may be given me, that I may open my mouth to proclaim boldly the mystery of the good news of the gospel. I guess because he was in prison.
Yeah. So let's start looking at this, and this is going to take us another discussion. So we're going to start off. We've done the in conclusion bit. So verse 12 starts off. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood. Okay,
Right.
so what is he talking about? What is he saying here? Is he saying we're fighting spirits?
No, I would think he's saying the war that they are involved in with their idols and their pagan worshipping. Can't that be what they're fighting there?
Okay. So what he's saying here is, it's not, I'm not facing my neighbor who disagrees with me and having a punch up with him. But I am fighting the concepts and the understandings and the pagan principles that he is trying to force upon me,
Yeah.
because now I have changed and he is still what he was.
Right.
And so it's not that I'm fighting the person, but I'm fighting the message the person is holding on to
Yeah.
and trying to condemn me for.
Yeah. Because he wants me to believe
Yeah.
what he believes.
So at one time you held these beliefs. And if you read the book, the letter to the Ephesians, Paul talks about holding certain beliefs, but now changing them. So it is the belief systems. It is all of the influence that you've had from the day that you were born, what you grew up in, what you followed, what you believed, whether you believed in all these gods or whether you believed in one God, all of the things that have formed your life, that have made you, molded you into what you are. This is what we are fighting. We are fighting these things. We're not fighting the person. So you say we're fighting against rulers, against authorities, against powers and it says of darkness, but it says of this present age.
And you're fighting
And we're going
the
to look at that word,
influences.
this age.
Aren't we fighting the influences
The influences of
what they...
the current government, the current atmosphere in religion, the way people feel about Jews, the way Jews feel about you, the way your fellow pagans, maybe your family members feel about you. There's much more going on than just butting your heads with somebody. These are concepts, these are belief systems, these are things that are powerful in your life, that have controlled your life. What you have put your belief in for all these years, all these decades that have gone by. What has formed the way you think?
So your belief system.
Yeah, so this is not just, we're just fighting some person.
Yeah.
It's just people.
Yeah.
No, these are powerful concepts.
And people's
Powerful.
belief systems are very powerful.
Belief systems
they
are
die
the
for
most,
them.
yeah, they're the most powerful influences in people's lives.
Right.
The things that we change, we are unwilling to change, or are most difficult to change.
Right, absolutely.
And the things that we will hold on to until death.
Yes.
These are the things
Yeah.
that we are struggling with.
And
Paul's
these are the
saying,
things that Paul's addressing.
yeah, he said, don't take it lightly.
Yeah, absolutely.
In actual fact, you need to be praying continually and praying for the other saints. Continually praying for them, because this is a battle. Now look at the metaphor that he's using. We're going to stop here with the metaphor, and then we'll carry on in our last discussion here. But he's using the metaphor of a soldier, or soldier going into battle, preparing himself for battle.
In verse 12,
So no, he goes on.
we're talking about 13. Therefore, put on God's complete armor.
Yeah. So he's using the metaphor of a soldier. He says, you people are like soldiers going into battle, but not against flesh and blood, but against all of these powerful concepts and beliefs that have run your lives and that you are struggling to get rid of.
Yep. To release.
Yeah. So, take on this armor. We're not going to go through the armor, but what we are going to do is we are going to look at... No, we're not. I don't have time to even start looking at these words. Let's just bring this to a close with as far as we've gone now, because if I start now, I've got to go on for another 20 minutes.
Okay.
And we don't want to do that right
No.
now. So we have a letter. Paul introduces it. Here's the body of the letter. We've discussed it in detail. We know what he's talking about. We know the message he's giving and who he's giving it to. And that's important for us to understand as we interpret chapter 6, verses 12 through 19.
Okay, good.
So thank you so much for watching, for sharing with us in our Bible study this evening. And share this with your social media friends. We do appreciate that.
Thank you, and we'll see you in the next lesson.
Thank you. Shalom.
Shalom.